with me, Darren Grimes, on telly, DAB and online. Today we're discussing the Conservative Party and what the future holds for it. We'll also be discussing the highs and lows of Boris's time in office and whether or not his resignation actually threatens our Brexit vote. But first, here's the news with Alice Porter.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. The Defence Secretary, who has been tipped as a front-runner, has ruled himself out of the Conservative Party leadership race. Posting on Twitter, Ben Wallace said it wasn't an easy choice, but his focus is his current job and keeping the country safe. Those who have entered the contest include former Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch, who says she supports lower taxes and a tight budget. Rishi Sunak has also announced his bid for Tory leader, and Foreign Secretary Liz Truss is also expected to run. Conservative MP Steve Baker says the party needs to find stability.
I know people are terribly angry and upset and bitter, and I've been called all the names under the sun. But we've got to face the reality. If he wasn't going, he couldn't form a government, and you just can't go on like that. You can't stand alone. You've got to form a government, and his government just collapsed. And that's very serious. What we need is political stability. I regret he's going. It's the right decision. We need to now try and find an optimistic way forward.
Meanwhile, Tom Hunt, the MP for Ipswich, told GB News he's backing Kemi Badenoch.
I see a candidate that I think is really strong, and if I see a candidate that excites me, if I see a candidate that I think has a really exciting and compelling vision and can win the next election and defeat Labour, then I'm going to want to back them. And for me, Kemi ticks those boxes. You know, she's fresh, she's authentic, as I say, she's not smooth. Well, I'd say she probably is smooth, but not smooth in an inauthentic way.
Members of the public have also been trying to predict who will be the next Prime Minister. A new training programme for Ukrainian soldiers has started in the UK. British troops will train up to 10,000 Ukrainians at sites across the country. It's being run by the Ministry of Defence, which says it will give volunteer recruits the necessary skills to fight Russian forces on the front line. A serving Metropolitan Police officer has been charged with rape. Special Constable Paul Hoyley was arrested in Essex on Wednesday following an alleged attack near Newport in Shropshire. He's been suspended from the force and will appear at Kidderminster Magistrates Court later today. Sri Lanka's Prime Minister says he's willing to resign to make way for an all-party government following demonstrations across the country. Thousands of protesters stormed the president's official residence in the capital in the latest escalation of political unrest. Police fired water cannon and tear gas at demonstrators who are demanding a change in regime as the country sees its worst economic crisis in more than 70 years. At least 2 people were gored during Pamplona's third bull run. The injuries are the first of that nature since the event started on Wednesday. Thousands of people turn out every year to watch the spectacle, with the weekend particularly crowded. 4 others were taken to hospital with concussions and injuries after falling. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now back to Real Britain with Darren Grimes.
Hello and welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Here's what's coming up on the show. The assistant editor of Conservative Home will be joining me to discuss the future of the Conservative Party following the PM's resignation. Who's topping the polls at the minute? The chief political writer at Spiked, Brendan O'Neill, will also be joining me. He'll be breaking down the highs and lows of Boris Johnson's career in politics. And for today's Campus Clash, I'll be asking 2 students whether or not the Prime Minister should have resigned, and if so, who should replace him. That's what we're talking about for the next hour. As ever, though, I'd love to know your thoughts. Are we talking about the right issues? What is it you want to talk about? What do you make of the PM's resignation? Tweet me at GBNews or email me on gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can watch us online too on YouTube, and don't forget Facebook. Loads of brilliant content on our page. Cheers very much. Now, I've made no secret of the fact that I found the last week to be quite a sad affair. I campaigned alongside Boris Johnson in 2016 and campaigned for him in 2019. I'm proud to have done so. In 2016, watching a packed room in Newcastle give an old Etonian Tory a standing ovation like a room of clapping seals was incredible. Watching constituencies that had voted Labour for their entire existence, you could put a donkey up on it with a red rosette and they would vote for it. But they voted for Boris for the first time. And it was so impressive to see. I'll never not be grateful to him for ensuring our votes for Brexit were respected. And frankly, that Corbynism, offering succour and support to anything remotely anti-British, was roundly defeated. But we are where we are. This is where we're at. Boris is out and a new leader must now be elected. And ultimately, I care more about the country and the conservation of its values, its heritage, its freedoms and its economy. If the Conservative Party is the best vehicle to defend those things, then happy days, folks. But as I say, I care more about the values of freedom and protecting those. But the Conservative Party has recently presided over an expansion of the state that we haven't seen during peacetime. We now have a public that believe, as it did during the pandemic, a government can do more, spend more, and as a consequence, take more. There lies the path to madness. The Conservative platform it cannot exist solely as a more moderate Labour or Green Party. It used to be the party of personal responsibility, individual freedom, and an understanding that you will spend your money a lot better than the government. It's a government that presides over energy insecurity to appease those who glue themselves to our roads and works of art, who block traffic and prevent progress in a country that, let's not forget, emits only 1% of global CO2 emissions. It presides over the online harms bill that seeks to empower those who are offended online. Rishi Sunak became this century's most successful socialist chancellor through tax raising and spending sprees. So is all lost, folks? Will Sabir Korma, having survived police investigation into Beergate, a man so wooden that he makes Pinocchio look agile and Samaja interesting, will he now glide to number 10 in the next election? Well, Kemi Badenoch is one of those running for the Tory leadership. And I don't know about you, but she's caught my eye. I first met Kemi when she was a Tory member of the London Assembly. She's now an MP for Saffron Walden in Essex, and originally from Nigeria. Kemi is somebody that came here because she loves our way of life and can see how much many of us take it for granted. Fraser Nelson, the editor of The Spectator magazine, Kemi's former employer, said that she was wondering what took the magazine so long to declare its support for Brexit. She couldn't understand why the greatest country in the world had so many in it that thought so little of it. So much so that they'd allow it to be swallowed up by some European conglomerate. In the London Assembly, she was a thorn in the side of the Identity First left, and she's been met by constant attrition of abuse because she dares be a black woman that doesn't view being black as being a victim, and certainly doesn't view being black and British as a problem. Far from it. And she dares to be a woman that recognises the importance of removing ideology from the debate around sex and gender, especially in our schools. We hear nothing anymore of the British dream of a country where your sex, your sexuality, your skin colour, your class, and whatever else doesn't mean a damn, in which would do away with divisive identity politics, and you can succeed in life exclusively on your work and your merit. Could Kemi Badenoch robustly champion that dream? The Conservative MP Tom Hunt certainly thinks so, and he spoke earlier to Alistair Stewart exclusively on GBNews.
I find it fascinating to see how Keir Starmer would handle Kemi Badenoch at the dispatch box. You know what I mean? I think we've all seen, I think many of us have seen Kemi Badenoch on the dispatch box. We've seen her absolutely take apart figures of the left. And I think that there's an argument to be made that Kemi Badenoch might be Labour's worst nightmare.
Well, there we are, Labour's worst nightmare. What more could a Tory party want? Far too many in the modern Conservative Party, you see, sit on the fence. They shrug their shoulders at the dispatch box and announce that trans women are women as gender ideology marches through our schools. They shrug their shoulders as the current communications chief to the Prime Minister took the knee on live television, as the racist idea of white privilege is propagated in our schools. They shrug their shoulders as children leave school to nightmare scenarios of drowning or burning thanks to apocalyptic climate change. Candidates like Kemi Badenoch give me hope that all isn't lost and that we can thwart this drift to a more divided, a more unequal and a less free Britain. Now, the Conservative Party is infamous for ousting its leaders with precious little remorse. In 1990, the men in grey suits told Maggie Thatcher that the game was up and off you go, pet. In 2019, Theresa May was forced to resign after her Brexit deal failed to gain enough support, if you can call it Brexit. And now the Conservative Party, which Sir Vince Cable once described as ruthless, calculating and tribal, has now got its way once more and pushed Boris Johnson to resign after just 3 years as PM. So now that Boris is stepping down, what does the future hold for the Conservative Party? Well, joining me now to discuss this is the Assistant Editor of Conservative Home, William Atkinson, the former Labour MP, Stephen Pound, and in the studio, my good friend, the political commentator, Maya Toosey. Maya, can I start with you? You heard what I had to say about Kemi Badenoch. I think you agree with me. Are you hearing from your YouTube channels, as popular as it is, that actually people are starting to take notice of Kemi?
Yes, thanks for having me, firstly, Darren. My channel are very diverse. Do we have supporters of Penny Mordaunt, Liz Truss and Kemi now? But I think you make a good point because Kemi is making waves and she's technically coming out of nowhere in terms of the public kind of national media persona, but she is already making a lot of noise. And I think we just need one candidate, and it's embarrassing that we only have one candidate who's not just willing to be anti-woke primarily, but also focusing on telling the truth and being a proactive potential leader. Because in these situations, the Tory party keep going with the concept of strong and stable. It's more reactive. They did it with the 2016 Theresa May, failed. They did it with the 2019 Jeremy Hunt's campaign, failed. Serious candidate for serious times. Rishi Sunak is doing the exact same thing. And the most candidates are going to be doing the exact same thing. I expect Penny Mordaunt's campaign to be similar, kind of more strong and stable, but slightly different to Rishi. Kemi, so far, is the only candidate, and I think Suella Braverman is trying to do the same thing. Kemi is the only one who's basically not just saying tell the truth, but be more proactive and actually come up with a vision, and that's very important.
William, what are the polls telling you? Because Con Home, for my viewers that don't know, Con Home run polls where the membership actually give their views, and they're very, very popular within the Conservative Party. But what does it tell us so far? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but Ben Wallace was up there, right?
Yes, so consistently now for several months, Ben Wallace has been the most popular candidate in our monthly survey to be the next leader. But of course, we've just got the news this afternoon that Ben Wallace will not be running to be the leader of the Conservative Party. In that case, it looks like the field is relatively wide open. In recent polls that we've done, it's suggested that Penny Mordaunt is the second most popular candidate, with Kemi Badenoch actually coming in about fifth behind Liz Truss and Nadeem Zahawi. So in that sense, it seems like the race is relatively open. However, over the last 24, 48 hours, we've seen that Rishi Sunak has rapidly accumulated the largest number of MPs so far, and he's announcing them in a sort of series of batches. So I would say that Rishi Sunak actually on paper now looks very much to be the front runner. Whilst Ben Wallace's endorsement will be well sought after, I can certainly see a sort of Rishi Wallace team in which Wallace was promised the ability to say at defence or be made, say, Deputy Prime Minister, etc., as being one that would likely sweep the board, especially amongst not just the parliamentary party, but even potentially amongst our members.
Indeed. But William, does the front runner runner in the Tory elections, right, the front runner, is always the one that ends up coming second, right? Oh, not always, but it,
Not
you know,
really.
it happened with
No,
David Cameron,
that's something
didn't
of a
it?
political cliche.
Is that a cliche?
Sorry, Darren, to say, but
that's quite all right.
Something of a cliche. That's actually incorrect, largely. It depends on the dynamics of the individual race. For example, Boris Johnson was the clear front runner last time and was the winner. Same with Theresa May in 2016. Now, if you can think about previous examples where people who weren't expected to win have won, both David Cameron came from third place to first in 2005, but then the contest was much longer. It was staged over several months. He made a famously excellent speech at the 2005 party conference, which pushed him straight into the lead. Now, there are some who fear perhaps that Rishi Sunak could be the Michael Portillo of this year's contest, because Michael Portillo was the front runner in 2001 until essentially all of the other people running turned against him. And it's thought that because the relationship between the Prime Minister and Rishi Sunak has deteriorated so greatly, that if it seems, as it does increasingly at the moment, that Rishi Sunak will likely be the front runner and the next Prime Minister, you will see an operation within Number 10 to try and clear the pitch as much as possible for Rishi Sunak and try to keep him out.
Well, indeed, that's going to be interesting to watch, isn't it? Now, the Labour MP, former Labour MP even, Stephen Pound, is patiently waiting there. Stephen, can I ask you, who would you fear were you still an MP? Who would actually, do you think, put the fear of God into Labour MPs more than most?
Well, there's only really one person. I have to say, I mean, Rishi, forget it. You know, he's weird, he's entitled, he's a multimillionaire, you know, there's all the tax dodging stuff. No, Rishi Sunak, bring him on, we'd love to. Kemi Badenoch, well, if the best she can do is to come up with Mr. Hunt from Ipswich, who says she's smooth, not smooth, authentically smooth, but not really smooth. You know, that's the best you can come up with. You know, as far as we're concerned, and I think earlier on, the Grimes Time manifesto about what we actually want for this country is rather more impressive, and you would actually got my vote. But look, the reality is, it's going to be a team. It's going to be a man and a woman team for the Tories. There's no way they're going to have a sort of a Wallace-Sunak team. That ain't going to happen. Tom Tugendhat isn't going to do it. He's going to be Foreign Secretary without a shadow of a doubt. The team that would really, really put the frighteners on us in the Labour Party, without a doubt, would be Penny Mordaunt as number 2 and Jeremy Hunt as number 1, because it would be the complete antithesis of Johnsonism. And Johnsonism now is as toxic as certain leaders have been in the Labour Party in the past. So any connection with Johnson, forget it. That's a dead weight. Rishi Sunak sat there with his arm around him all those years, not a chance. Hunt is untouched, he's untainted, and he's free from that. He is the person who could come to the country, and a contest between him and Keir Starmer may not actually have people dancing in the street and leaping around with excitement, but it would be serious, sober, sensible, and good for the nation in a time of utter global, continental and domestic crisis. And frankly, mate, that's what we want.
Maya, Stephen Pound there saying that actually who Labour would fear the most would be Jeremy Hunt, because he would cut through, and actually I would argue he would just be exactly as the same as Sir Keir Starmer, because in my opinion, it wasn't what Boris Johnson stood for that was unpopular, right? That won him that massive landslide in 2019, the biggest since Maggie T was in office. Actually, it was the poor implementation and the other stuff that went on alongside of it, right? There's Stephen Pound showing us that Thatcher resigns.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. Of course, if you get the opinion of not just the Labour side, but also the wet side of the Tory party, it's in their interest to actually push for certain candidates because they have their own interests. If you ask Keir Starmer, he would probably say, let's have Jeremy Hunt as Prime Minister. That would be a good idea. But in reality, a lot of times, it's actually because they have lived in their own bubble for the past few years and couple of decades. The so-called strong and stable establishment types. Right now, we need a proactive visionary, sort of like a Tony Blair in '97 when he had a lot of money to spend. He didn't stand on a platform of just reactive. He actually wanted to do something. It is now time to actually make some changes. Again, not just 1997, but 79 with Margaret Thatcher. And I just find it sad that we only have one or maximum two candidates who are offering that. One of them is Kemi Badenoch.
William, where have these candidates actually been for the past, few months? It's been widely reported that Boris Johnson's future was on a knife edge for some time now after the drip of scandal after scandal. Now, many of my viewers, William, may well be of the view that this was a constant attrition of an attempt to remove a very popular Prime Minister. But where have these candidates been? Because it strikes me that they're very disorganised, William. Am I wrong? Am I being unfair?
Well, I think obviously the team that are most organised are Rishi Sunak, hence why they've managed to get out in front so very quickly. We know Sunak has been planning a leadership campaign for quite a while. He almost moved against the Prime Minister in December and January at the sort of initial height of the Partygate scandal. But I would also say that a lot of these teams are just being sort of written up on the back of a fag packet, where lots of MPs who think they might have a tilt at the leadership or think that their best way of trying to retain a role in cabinet or even earn one is to set up a team now. You also see, say, Tugendhat, for example, was well prepared, so hence he had an op-ed in the Telegraph as quickly as he can manage. But I would just like to come back quickly on a point that Stephen was making. It was nice to see that the old arguments of the reactionary left can still be trotted out in 2022. But I would suggest that Stephen might want to check an opinion poll every once in a while, because the agenda that the Prime Minister ran on in 2019, rather than the Prime Minister himself, when he came into office in 2019, he was the most unpopular Prime Minister in recent memory. But it was actually the agenda that won the election in 2019.
Yeah.
According to all the polls, Rishi Sunak is by far the most trusted person to both implement that agenda.
Stephen, very briefly come back to that.
Win over Labour voters.
Yeah. I mean, in 2019, the leadership of the Labour Party wasn't enormously popular on the doorstep, and you can't ignore that factor. But the second thing is that the 2019 Tory Party manifesto was Boris Johnson made flesh. He was the manifesto. He was the image. He was the person who came to the country with the slogan.
Well, we'll see what happens.
The manifesto, it was Johnson.
We will see what happens. That was the assistant editor of Con Home, William Atkinson, ex-Labour MP Stephen Pound, and the political commentator Maya Toosey. Plenty more to come this afternoon, folks, on Real Britain. Next, I'm going to be talking to Richard Tice, leader of Reform UK, about the levelling up agenda and the prospects for Brexit after the PM's resignation. But first, here's a look at the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking warm and dry with plenty of sunny spells for the vast majority. Let's take a look at the details. Plenty of blue skies this evening across southwest England, where winds will be coming in from the north but will be light. Warm for all with temperatures around 22 degrees Celsius. Southeast England and the London area will be dry and sunny this evening with generally light winds. Temperatures will be around 25 degrees Celsius. Sunshine continuing across the whole of Wales through this evening with light northerly winds, feeling very warm with temperatures of 22 to 25 degrees Celsius. The Midlands will continue to enjoy blue skies and lots of sunshine. Winds will be light and it will be warm for most of the day with temperatures still above 20 degrees Celsius. There is the chance of a little cloud across parts of northeast England, though there will be plenty of warm sunshine too. Temperatures ranging from 16 at the coast to 20 Celsius inland. Northern Scotland will remain cloudy this evening, with some patchy light rain moving eastwards. Further south, it will be dry with plenty of sunshine. Temperatures still around 18 degrees Celsius. Northern Ireland remains dry this evening with variable amounts of cloud. There will be plenty of sunny spells though, with temperatures around 17 to 20 degrees Celsius. Winds staying light for all. Staying warm and dry tonight for many with clear skies. Patchy rain still possible for the far north of Scotland, and that's how the weather is shaping up over until tomorrow morning.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory.
twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome back to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Thank you very much for your company. Now, folks, joining me in the studio is Richard Tice, leader of Reform UK. Richard, thank you very much for your company.
Great to be with you.
Always a pleasure to see you. Now, levelling up, I want to start by talking to you about levelling up. That was the whole pitch in 2019, as well as getting Brexit done, which we both supported.
Yep, absolutely.
That levelling up agenda, putting, boots on the ground, actually building up and reviving parts of the country that have been ignored for far too long. Do you think that's at risk without Boris Johnson as PM?
No, the truth is, Darren, like many of Boris's slogans, great slogans, no delivery, no action, complete waffle. He even had to appoint a minister for levelling up to work out what it meant, because he didn't have a clue. None of them had a clue. There's been no levelling up whatsoever. But let me tell you what I would do. In fact, the only attempt at levelling up they've done is to continue with HS2, which sadly is exactly the opposite. It's actually levelling down by bringing people a little bit quicker from the north to London. So what I think they should do is they should cancel HS2. That would save 100 billion quid, and we should use that money rapidly, urgently, to invest it in the north. East-west links from Liverpool to Manchester to Leeds to Hull to Newcastle. That would be truly levelling up. But here's the other thing, and I've heard on the doors campaigning up and down the country. We've got an energy crisis. We're potentially facing rationing this winter. It's the gravest crisis since the Second World War. The best thing in terms of levelling up is to drill down for shale gas. The value of our shale gas is in the rock is £1 trillion plus.
Wow.
£1 trillion. That's half our national debt. Think about this. £1 trillion of levelling up by drilling down. It would create jobs. It would release the treasure under our feet, which is completely wasted at the moment. And we could have a huge sovereign wealth fund. We could invest it in the regions, in the north, in the southwest. All these opportunities. And actually, it's better for the environment. Because if we use our own gas, domestic gas, you save CO2 emissions compared to importing it. So it's an absolute win-win. And for me, that's the biggest, the fastest, that's the most effective form of levelling up in terms of the value that it would create, that it would unleash this huge treasure.
We were just talking there in the segment before you came on, Richard, with William from Conservative Home, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. And he was saying that Rishi, right now, is looking like the front runner. Does that have Reform UK, your political party, formerly the Brexit Party, does that have you quaking in your boots?
Absolutely not. To be honest, I'd be delighted if Rishi Sunak wins, because we will have even more members joining us. We've had, really good numbers in the last couple of days saying, I'm done with the Tories, can't trust them, they're not going to do the right thing, they're not going to cut taxes, and Rishi's confirmed it this morning. He is the serious candidate. I'll tell you what he is for. If you're ready for Rishi, you're ready for more tax rises, you're ready for more inflation, you're ready for more growth. Are you still ready for Rishi? I don't think so. But a Rishi Sunak candidate, successful Prime Minister for the Tory party, would be bad for the country. It would actually be good for Reform UK, because more and more people would see that our agenda is the real Conservative agenda of cutting taxes hard on consumer goods, on VAT, having a sensible agenda to reduce emissions. We all want to reduce emissions, but let's use our shale gas under feet. None of these candidates are talking about shale gas. the treasure under our feet. None of them are talking about the opportunity. None of them are talking, how do we get energy bills down? How are we self-reliant? It's extraordinary. They don't seem to understand how people are really suffering up and down the country.
I couldn't agree with you more. And family members of mine are saying, look, I'm not driving the car on weekends anymore, just can't afford to. And I'm wondering, Richard, if actually politicians, all too willingly, frankly, support this agenda of people rolling back their energy use. It's primarily working class people, let's not forget. It's not Chelsea tractors being driven around that are struggling right now. Do you actually think that this is part of a wider agenda, a sort of net zero agenda, or as you call it, Richard, a net stupid agenda?
Look, we all want to do our bit. We all care about the environment, but, Boris's bit, which I think they all sign up to, in fact, the whole of Westminster sign up to, it's the wrong bit at the wrong price in the wrong time frame. And all it will do is impoverish the whole nation. It'll send our jobs and money overseas, and it's the least well off, the lowest paid, the poorest in society who suffer most with small increases or large increases, as we've seen, in energy bills, in fuel prices. And the truth is, actually, fossil fuels have enriched all of us. We live longer lives. Billions more people around the world actually benefit with longer lives, with more energy, with cheaper energy, because of fossil fuels. So yes, let's use technology to reduce emissions, but let's recognise that actually cheap, cost-effective energy by fossil fuels is our best opportunity. We've got all of this energy resource of our own. We could be so wealthy as a nation. We could cut taxes for tens of millions of people really significantly. But to do that, let's use our own treasure.
So who then is the man or woman to actually deliver the kind of vision that you're talking about?
At the moment, I haven't heard any of them talk about energy. I haven't heard any of them talk about shale gas. And they all talk about tax cuts. Boris Johnson talked about tax cuts. I want to be able to trust someone. And the truth is, given that almost all of the candidates, with a couple of honourable exceptions, sat in that cabinet and completely betrayed the manifesto they stood on, I don't trust any of them. And I think people need to be really careful about who they place their trust in.
Well, I agree. And that is Richard Tice there, leader of Reform UK, formerly the Brexit Party, who I think, if the Tories get this wrong, folks, many people may well be looking to you, Richard. So we shall see. But thank you for your time, as ever. Now, folks, what we're going to be talking about next, that was, of course, the leader of the Reform UK, but we're going to be talking about Johnson's legacy next. And Richard has his views, and I've got mine, certainly. But Brendan O'Neill has a very interesting take that you absolutely will not want to miss. But first, here's the news with Alice Porter.
It's just gone 2:30. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. The Defence Secretary, who was among the bookies' favourites, has ruled himself out of the Conservative Party leadership race. Posting on Twitter, Ben Wallace said it wasn't an easy choice, but his focus is his current job and keeping the country safe. Those who have entered the contest include former Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch, who says she supports lower taxes and a tight budget, and Rishi Sunak. Ukrainian soldiers have started a new training programme in the UK to help them win the war against Russia. British troops will train up to 10,000 Ukrainians at sites across the country. It's being run by the Ministry of Defence, which says it will give volunteer recruits the necessary skills to fight on the front line. A serving Metropolitan Police officer has been charged with rape. Special Constable Paul Hoyle was arrested in Essex on Wednesday following an alleged attack near Newport in Shropshire. He's been suspended from the force and will appear at Kidderminster Magistrates Court later. Sri Lanka's Prime Minister says he's willing to resign to make way for an all-party government following demonstrations across the country. Thousands of protesters have stormed the president's official residence in the latest escalation of political unrest. Police fired water cannon and tear gas at demonstrators who are demanding a regime change. At least 2 people have been gored during Pamplona's bull run, the first time since the event started on Wednesday. Thousands of people turn out every year to watch the spectacle, which features 8 runs that last between 3 and 5 minutes each. 4 others were taken to hospital with concussions and injuries after falling. TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Darren will be back in a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
It's now 2:38 and it's time to discuss the highs and lows of Boris Johnson's premiership. Boris won the Conservative Party their biggest majority since 1987 and the biggest share of the vote since 1979. However, it wasn't to be for the PM. As scandal after scandal, a constant attrition, a drip, damaged his integrity beyond reconciliation in the minds of the Parliamentary Conservative Party. I know not to many of you out there at home. But despite getting Brexit done, a hugely successful vaccine rollout and leading Europe in supporting Ukraine in the war against Russia, it wasn't enough to save him. So how will the history books treat Boris Johnson as Prime Minister? Well, with me now to discuss this very issue is the chief political writer for Spiked Online, Brendan O'Neill. Brendan, thank you very much for your company. Now, I've read your column in both Spiked and The Spectator, Brendan, and you actually say, look, I'm not pleased about this.
Yeah, I'm not pleased about what's happened at all. I think there's a whiff of anti-democracy to it. And we do have to remember the fact that Boris was voted into power very enthusiastically by 14 million people. And we know why he was voted into power. It's because he said he would get Brexit done. And the rest of the political establishment at that time was basically saying, we'll get Brexit overthrown. We'll put it in the bin. We'll get rid of it. So that's why he won. Now, he has made many mistakes since the election in 2019. I didn't like his lockdowns. I think he listened to so-called experts too much. He's more authoritarian than I would like. And of course, there have been these scandals. But he was elected on a clear democratic mandate. And the way he's been swept from power makes me feel a little bit nervous.
And why does it make you feel nervous, Brendan? What is it that you think is waiting in the wings to thwart the democratic will? Do you actually seriously believe that Brexit is potentially at risk now?
I do, I'm afraid. And we've already seen people like Michael Heseltine saying Boris is gone, now Brexit should go. The Guardian is already publishing pieces saying everything that Boris did should be overturned, including Brexit. So the vultures and the ghouls of the Remainer elite are already circling around and hoping that they can finally drive the final nail into the coffin of Brexit. That's how they see it. So we have to bear that in mind and be very aware that that could well happen, that they will make those kinds of efforts. But the thing, when we look back on Boris's premiership, the thing that really gets me is the idea that we should be more horrified by Boris than we were by the Remainer elites that preceded him is really shocking to me. Boris has done nothing as bad or immoral or anti-democratic as what those elites tried to do in the run-up to 2019, where they spent all their time trying to overturn millions of votes, the most undemocratic movement in modern British history. And the idea that we should be more shocked by Boris making a few errors and not knowing if Chris Pincher was pinching bums or not, rather than the reason he was elected into power, which was to push back that undemocratic elite, that's the kind of narrative we need to challenge. And we need to remember why he's there and what the rest of the establishment was trying to do to our right to vote.
Yeah, Brendan, I don't know about you, but my inbox is absolutely packed with people livid with the Parliamentary Conservative Party, actually. They very much view Boris as their man. Here's this politician, all of a sudden, a great orator, came along and he was able to actually speak to communities like that, which I'm from, but not just County Durham, countless communities that primarily voted Brexit in towns and villages up and down the country. He was able, despite the fact he was an old Etonian Tory, he was able to actually speak their language. And they're worried, actually, that their man being booted out by the Parliamentary Party, they view it as treacherous, frankly.
Yeah, and I share some sympathy with that worldview. And, to me, the fact that Boris got voted into power is the least mysterious thing that has happened in British politics for a very long time. Because what was people's alternative? There's a Labour Party which wanted to overthrow their vote for Brexit, which can't even say what a woman is, which can't even answer the question, does a woman have a penis, which in my view is the easiest question in the whole world to answer, and which looks with utter contempt upon the working class communities that it used to claim to represent. It looks at them as feckless, obese, racist, xenophobes. They voted against the EU because they hate foreigners. I mean, these were the contemptuous messages being pushed by large sections of the left. And the fact that the working classes in large number shifted to Boris and said, well, he seems to treat us with a bit more respect. He respects what we voted for and he respects our communities. That was an incredibly important realignment in British politics. And if the next leader of the country and the Conservative Party doesn't uphold that realignment, the Tories could be in big trouble.
So, Brendan, then, I'm going to ask you to play the role of Mystic Meg right now, right? If you got your crystal ball out and you were able to look into it and see who the next leader of the Conservative Party is going to be, what worries me, my crystal ball has a picture of Rishi Sunak in, right? And frankly, I find him about as exciting as, I don't know what, watching Sir Keir Starmer at the dispatch box, right? It really is dull as ditch water, Rishi's platform and prospective parliamentary outlook, frankly. And I don't know how he's going to actually appeal to the kind of voters that you've just really eloquently spoken about.
No, I don't see how he can appeal to them either. And I think there's something really iffy and questionable about the fact that Rishi Sunak was making his website ready for Rishi for the past few months when he was supposed to be running the economy. He was supposed to be helping us all out of the cost of living crisis. And there he was apparently plotting and scheming to be the next leader of the country. And that will not go down well with many people. But, I don't know who I want to be the next leader of the Tory party. I just know that I think there needs to be a general election pretty quickly after this person becomes prime minister, because they weren't voted into power in the same way that Boris was. I think Kemi Badenoch is easily my favourite. I think she's incredibly sensible. She understands the issues of sovereignty and freedom and the problem with wokeness. I think Suella Braverman's got lots of good ideas too, and she is pretty good on Brexit, and she's pretty strong on defending reason and sense against the woke mob. So those two would be my favourites. I don't think they're going to get it just yet, but I think as long as we support politicians like that, we have a chance to turn over the woke narrative.
Yeah, Brendan, before I lose you, I just want to really quickly ask you, a lot of people, I think, have been a little bit too glib about all of this, and the prospect of Labour getting into power is, oh, well, it's Sir Keir Starmer, it's a shrug of the shoulders. But actually, when you've got a politician, Brendan, I don't know about you, a politician that takes the knee, a politician that refuses to tell us what a woman is, a politician that actually was supremely relaxed about Jeremy Corbyn, and, as you rightly say, a politician that was supremely relaxed about riding roughshod over the biggest democratic vote for anyone and anything in our Brexit vote. Really quickly, what do you think actually Sir Keir Starmer would mean for the country?
Keir Starmer would be a disaster. He might come across as a bit boring and a bit stiff, but he has very problematic views. The first being that he treated the vote for Brexit with such extraordinary contempt and classism, in my view. And also, he can't answer the question, what is a woman? Now, that might sound frivolous, but if you can't say what a woman is, why should we trust you on other bigger issues like how to run the economy or how to steer the country into the future? So he has been swallowed up by wokeness and Remainer elitism, and working class people, I don't think, will trust him for a very long time.
We'll have to leave it there. That was the chief political writer for Spiked Online, the brilliant Brendan O'Neill. Now, folks, with me now, still in the studio to reflect on what Brendan has just said, is the political commentator Maya Tusi. Maya, Rishi Sunak is getting a pretty hard time on my show today, and I didn't know that was going to happen, but we are where we are. Do you think that actually a lot of the party membership, many of them, as I say, will be watching your show, do you think that these people at home will be thinking the same?
A lot of them, but even those who are unintentionally backing Rishi Sunak is because not just this country, as a culture, we don't like change. The Tory members don't like change. They're afraid of change. So voting for Margaret Thatcher in 75 and 79 those days was a bit of a risk. Even 2019, Boris Johnson's leadership was a bit of a risk, and they got it. But now they want Boris. They still want Boris, a lot of them, the Tory members. And they technically see Rishi as a kind of continuity sort of thing, which is kind of weird because the problem I had, and a lot of people like me, with Boris wasn't just the scandals and the lies, was the platform, the actual governance of it, or lack of governance. And Rishi was number two. So I'm not really sure exactly why everything's so inevitable, because the right of the Tory party, or whatever you want to call it, the anti-establishment side of it, there are too many candidates, they need to unite, and they need to actually get one candidate. And right now, there is literally no one that could be the full package. Like, I like Kemi. I like Kemi's ideas, what she says. And I like Liz Truss's free trade stuff. But, you know, I don't. They have to, like, merge, like Transformers. They've got to get turn into one candidate.
Maya, you're right. They've got to get a grip. That was Maya Tusi, who we will be coming back to after this break from discussing the Prime Minister. We're going to be discussing now Maya Forstater. Now, Maya is a tax expert working for the Centre for Global Development think tank, and she actually won a legal case against that organisation after being removed by them and blackballed over her gender-critical views. Mrs Forstater, she was informed she wouldn't continue to be employed by the group after she tweeted that transgender women couldn't change their biological sex. So is this a welcome change from woke persecution? Well, joining me to discuss the story further is the political commentator, Emma Webb. Emma, thank you very much for your company. What message do you think this actually sends to woke HR departments who, I think, there is this really pervasive culture of whackery and wokery dominating much of corporate HR right now? Do you think actually this sends a signal to them?
I think this does more than send a signal. I think it actually it's a precedent. It's a serious legal precedent. So what happened with Maya Forstater is that in 2019 she lost her first case, where the judge ruled that the reason why her views weren't protected under the Equality Act was because they weren't respectable in a democratic society. She then took this and appealed it. The High Court found that actually her views were protected philosophical beliefs under the Equality Act. Her belief that you can't change your sex. And now this latest court case really entrenches that precedent even further. So I think actually many HR departments and employers around the country will be giving a second thought to the way that they treat the opinions of their employees and the sort of action that they take against them. Actually, this is going to make people far more secure in their work and feel freer to basically to express themselves online, as Maya Forstater did. So it's not just a victory in the narrow sense for gender critical feminists and people who don't believe that trans women are women, but it's also a victory for free speech overall.
Yeah, I've got two more questions I want to get through, so I'll prattle on quite quickly, Emma, because you know what I'm like. My gob could go on for days. But I want to talk to you about and I've just been discussing this with Brendan O'Neill, the fact that politicians like Sir Keir Starmer, opposition parties that people may well be looking at during this crisis in the Conservative Party, when they can't bring themselves to say what a woman is, what does that mean, Emma?
Well, you would like to think that actually the fact that Keir Starmer and the leadership of the Labour Party are so reticent to just say what most people around the country believe is simple biological fact, that alone would make Keir Starmer unelectable. That actually those victories, like the victory in the Wakefield by-election, wasn't necessarily a victory for Labour, but was just a failure on the part of the Conservative Party. So I think the issues within our politics, and this goes back to what Maya was saying there, this is something that is across the board. It reaches across both sides of the House. It's a failure in political leadership. It's a failure of the political class. And it goes back to what we were discussing before COVID hit about the Great Realignment, that we're still suffering the consequences of that the parties do not align with the views of the British public. And we need to see some kind of change in our political class so that the voices of people around the country are actually being heard. And at the moment, neither party represents that. Kemi Badenoch, on the other hand, is someone who I think, as a potential leader of the Conservative Party, would uphold truth, which is what she wrote in the Times today, and the views of the British public.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's going to think at home, Emma, that I've been giving you all a tenner, a backhander, to back Kemi Badenoch. I promise I haven't, but everyone I've had on my show speaks so highly of her. It speaks volumes. I want to quickly ask you, Emma, about what happened this week to Macy Gray, the singer, for those at home who don't know her. Now, she was on a talk show, which isn't as good as this one, but she was on a talk show, and Macy Gray was asked about her views on the issues that you've just been discussing. Really simple issues like, are trans women women, yada, yada, yada. Now, she was forced to apologise for her comments about trans women, and she has, basically come out, Emma, and said that she's been re-educated. What's going on there?
She also, after having apologised, responded to those who were attacking her, and she said threatening her on social media, and told them basically, without pardon, not using the French, she told them where to stick it. So Macy Gray is obviously a very progressive woman. On this talk show, she was actually saying that she believed that the American flag should be redesigned to be more representative of the ethnic diversity of the country. So she's a very progressive woman. She was simply saying that she doesn't believe that a person can change their biological sex. She was talking essentially about her lived experience of being a woman, and has come out saying that she wasn't really even commenting on trans issues. But I think she was speaking and adding her voice to a debate and a conversation that perhaps she wasn't fully on top of.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why she stepped on a tripwire. But her views are entirely progressive, and she is just a latest example of a woman being trampled on for saying what everybody else is thinking.
Absolutely. Those tripwires are everywhere, and it seems to me that those tripwires seem to almost exclusively go after women, Emma. But there we are, the new misogyny. That was the political commentator Emma Webb there with her fantastic views. Now, back to beleaguered Boris. Over the last few weeks, the Prime Minister has consistently argued that he has a mandate to lead the country, but the Parliamentary Conservative Party said otherwise. So, was Boris right to resign, or is this just the selfish nature of MPs who put their careers ahead of the interests of the wider country? Well, with me now to discuss this are students Anna McGovern and Sophie Corcoran. Sophie, can I start with you? Why do you reckon Boris shouldn't have resigned?
Well, for two reasons. Firstly, it's been an absolute catastrophe. Firstly, what it has done is effectively show that the media has the power to oust the Prime Minister, and the Paul Browns of the world have more power in determining who is running our country than the actual electorate itself. Secondly, it's also a catastrophe because it now means that in the midst of a cost of living crisis, a healthcare crisis, a crisis in Ukraine, we have no Prime Minister for 3 months, a distracted and a divided Conservative Party, because he was ousted over incredibly insignificant issues that have no bearing on our standards of life. You know, wallpaper, Partygate, Chris Pincher's debacle, that doesn't affect the way me and you live. But the things that we are ignoring as a result of this does. It does have an impact on how much money we have in our pockets or how we can live.
Yeah, so Sophie, people like you are on the side of saying, well, hang on a minute, Anna, you are just being selfish. Are you being selfish, Anna?
Oh, no, absolutely not. And I couldn't disagree more, if I'm honest. And I think many people are actually surprised that it's taken this long for him to have resigned and have that leadership now taken over by someone else who can actually make a difference to the political sphere. Through his time as Prime Minister, we have seen so much dishonesty in his leadership, so much scandal, and the people have been affected by those decisions and by all those scandals that have taken place.
Yeah, Anna's line there is crackling somewhat. But Sophie, you've heard what Anna's had to say there, right? The PM, in your view, still has a mandate from the people, right? And I'm worried that actually Brexit's at risk now. Are you?
Yeah, I mean, we saw the reaction from several EU leaders saying that this is going to make it easier to rekindle relationships with them. We've also had Tom Tungan and Sajid Javid have just got endorsements from Anna Soubry, which is the ultimate kiss of death. But in terms of a Conservative member's perspective, we've also seen that they are trying to position the leadership election in a way to remove the Brexit candidates from running. I got a thing here from Sebastian Payne that basically said MPs are well aware of their responsibilities of choosing the shortlist because the grassroots are well to the right of the parliamentary party, and we've got to make sure that we don't give them a shortlist where they could choose someone that's unfit to govern, which basically means they don't want an actual right-winger to be the next PM, and they're dragging this party basically to Lib Dems in blue, and that's what they want. It's a big concern.
Anna, do you want to turn the Tory party into a Lib Dem light party?
No, I do not. What I want to see is someone that can lead with the integrity that we need. And I think this will be a really good opportunity for someone to actually say that they want to lead with the truth that the British public needs in our government right now. And I think this would be a really good opportunity for that to happen.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately, folks. I could let this go on because I dare say Sophie Corcoran is right now chomping at the bit. But that was the students, Anna McGovern and Sophie Corcoran there with me for Campus Clash. Now, folks, you're watching Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. I'll be back after this break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GBNews, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome. This is Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes, on telly, DAB and online. Today we'll be asking whether or not the PM's resignation is a threat to our vote for Brexit. We'll also be discussing how 4 in 10 primary school kids are missing targets for reading, writing and maths. And I'll be talking to the defence editor at The Telegraph about how Boris's fall might affect the war in Ukraine. But first, here's the news with Rhiannon Jones.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 3 o'clock. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. The Defence Secretary, who was tipped as a front-runner in the Conservative Party leadership contest, has ruled himself out of the race. Posting on Twitter, Ben Wallace said it wasn't an easy choice, but his focus is his current job and keeping the country safe. Those who have entered the contest include former Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch, who says she supports lower taxes and a tight budget. Rishi Sunak has also announced his bid for Tory leader, and Foreign Secretary Liz Truss is also expected to run. Conservative MP Steve Baker says the party needs to find stability.
I know people are terribly angry and upset and bitter, and I've been called all the names under the sun. But we've got to face the reality. If he wasn't going, he couldn't form a government, and you just can't go on like that. You can't stand alone. You've got to form a government, and his government just collapsed. And that's very serious. What we need is political stability. I regret he's going. It's the right decision. We need to now try and find an optimistic way forward.
Meanwhile, Tom Hunt, the MP for Ipswich, told GB News he's backing Kemi Badenoch.
I see a candidate that I think is really strong, and if I see a candidate that excites me, if I see a candidate that I think has a really exciting and compelling vision and can win the next election and defeat Labour, then I'm going to want to back them. And for me, Kemi ticks those boxes. You know, she's fresh, she's authentic, as I say, she's not smooth. Well, I'd say she probably is smooth, but not smooth in an inauthentic way.
Members of the public have also been trying to predict who will be the next Prime Minister.
Probably Rishi Sunak, I imagine. Yes, Rishi Sunak.
Why Rishi Sunak?
It seems like he's, been gunning for that role for quite some time. Yeah. I don't know. It might be Liz. What's her name?
Liz Truss?
Yeah, Liz Truss. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this now, but I'm just glad that he's leaving, and whoever comes next will be better.
A new training programme for Ukrainian soldiers has started in the UK. British troops will train up to 10,000 Ukrainians at sites across the country. It's being run by the Ministry of Defence, which says it will give volunteer recruits the necessary skills to fight Russian forces on the front line. A serving Metropolitan Police officer has been charged with rape. Special Constable Paul Hoyley was arrested in Essex on Wednesday following an alleged attack near Newport in Shropshire. He's been suspended from the force and will appear at Kidderminster Magistrates Court later today. Sri Lanka's Prime Minister says he's willing to resign to make way for an all-party government following demonstrations across the country. Thousands of protesters stormed the president's official residence in the capital in the latest escalation of political unrest. Police fired water cannon and tear gas at demonstrators who are demanding a change in regime as the country sees its worst economic crisis in more than 70 years. At least 2 people were gored during Pamplona's 3rd bull run. The injuries are the first of that nature since the event started on Wednesday. Thousands of people turn out every year to watch the spectacle, with the weekend particularly crowded. 4 others were taken to hospital with concussions and injuries after falling. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now back to Real Britain with Darren Grimes.
Welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Here's what's coming up over this next hour. I'm going to be discussing on Thursday. Boris Johnson, of course, announced he would resign as Prime Minister. So I'm asking the question, does this mark the beginning of the end for Brexit? I'll also be talking to an education consultant about SAT results in schools and how only 59% of students actually met the required competency score, a drop of 10% from the pre-pandemic years. What have we done? And we'll be highlighting the PM's true statesmanship over the war in Ukraine and how he is given more support than any other world leader. That's what we're talking about for the next hour. As ever, though, your gob is much more important than my own. I'd love to know your thoughts on Ukraine and Boris's fall. Should they be worried? Should we be worried? Tweet me at GBNews or email me on gbviews@gbnews.uk. Watch us online on YouTube and don't forget Facebook. Loads of cracking content on our GB News page. Cheers very much. Now, over the last week, it's come to light that many Remainers, or Ramonas as I like to call them, have been spending months after months trying to oust Boris Johnson. I'd say longer than months, right? They've been doing this since he actually managed to help secure that vote for Brexit, so they can actually reverse it and rejoin the European conglomerate. Europhile Lord Adonis and Lord Heseltine, Heza, who are Lord Adonis is chair of the European movement. Ugh, as hideous as that sounds. They made numerous suggestions, folks, that getting Boris out of number 10 could actually spark the critical point in the battle for the soul of our country. In other words, folks, rejoining the European Union. So does Boris resigning mark the end of Brexit? Well, with me now to discuss is the co-founder of the independent British network, Brendan Chilton, and former Labour MP and Minister for Europe, Dennis McShane. Now, Dennis, you're one of those Ramonas, aren't you? You must be delighted.
I'm delighted a liar has left Downing Street. I mean, every Tory seems to be delighted as well. Look at them all queuing up to replace him. I mean, it's been a very embarrassing 3 years. In fact, I think the last three Tory Prime Ministers, Mr Cameron, Theresa May, now Boris Johnson, have been, the least impressive PMs in my lifetime. The fact he's gone doesn't mean the end of Brexit. It's another staging post. There's going to be a discussion, I assume, in the Tory party election to replace him. My guess is every one of the candidates will swear on their mother's milk that they are even more anti-European, more isolationist, more hostile to partnership with Europe than Boris Johnson was. Mm-hmm. So I'm not quite sure this is... Andrew Doe's very old friend. I know Michael Heseltine, of course. I'm just not sure they're that much in touch.
I see. Right. Brendan, so is that right, do you think? Is it just the fact that actually these dinosaurs, these relics of British politics actually are getting this wrong?
I think they are getting this wrong. I think Brexit is now the established consensus in British politics. The Conservative Party would never take us back into the European Union, and Keir Starmer, it was kind of missed because of all the dramas with the government, but Keir Starmer earlier this week gave a speech to Labour members and to journalists where he also said that a future Labour government would not seek to take the country back into the EU, the single market or the customs union. So I do think we now have a consensus. We're outside the European Union. We're not going back in anytime soon. All I would say, though, is that the government didn't get Brexit done. We still have, and I've just noticed Ben's joining us. I think Ben Habib will have something to say about the situation in Northern Ireland, which is far from settled. And there are also many issues to do with future trading arrangements, which the government have been kicking down the road now for over a year and a half, which have got to be resolved. So Brexit isn't sorted yet, but it is the consensus.
Yes, well, I hope that's true. I really, really do hope that's true. And I know Ben Habib, who joins us now for my radio listeners, will very much be of the view that Brexit should remain. But Dennis McShane there saying actually he agrees with us, Ben Habib, and that actually people like Lord Heza and Adonis are just getting this wrong, out of touch.
Very simply, Darren.
I mean, if they have an interest in the Conservative Party being re-elected...
Hang on. Dennis, I'll let you come back to that. But Ben, do you want to go first?
Well, I was just going to say, I think they are, if this is about getting re-elected, if this is about winning the 2024 election, if Heseltine's views are given any credence within the parliamentary party, the Conservatives will be toast. I mean, look at the pressure the Conservatives are already under. They lost Wakefield. They lost Tiverton and Honiton, which they've basically held with the exception of 1 year since 1885. They lost Westminster Council. They lost Wandsworth. They lost West Oxfordshire. The Conservative Party is under real pressure. The one way to absolutely ensure electoral defeat is now to come back to the Brexit question. Brexit has to be completed. I'm so glad Brendan said it hasn't yet been completed. It saves me the breath of having to say that. But it hasn't, and there's still a task. There's still a task to be done. And the new leader has to get on and deliver that.
I can see Dennis McShane is absolutely beside himself, so I'm going to let him come back in.
Okay. No, Darren. Look, I'm in France at the moment. I was speaking yesterday at a big defence conference in Paris, and all the French generals and admirals said how well they get on with their British opposite numbers. And in defence terms, we have to cooperate with our European allies. But listening to Ben and Brendan, they're great guys, but they remind me of the Russian Revolution in 1917. In fact, Boris slightly reminds me of old Rasputin. You remember him? He was a mad monk who tried to guide the Tsarina, and they shot him, they killed him, they poisoned him, they threw him in the river, and he still bounced back. And he hasn't gone yet, but that's for another debate. But basically, when the Russian Revolution happened, what they said was, they're not revolutionary enough. Lenin hasn't completed the revolution. Only Trotsky can complete the revolution. That only Stalin
Dennis,
can complete the
I'm afraid
revolution.
you're talking utter
and that's
rubbish.
the trouble, you see. I mean,
I just have to say,
right, let's
Dennis, not about a revolution.
Ben, let Dennis.
The United Kingdom becoming an independent nation.
Ben, I'm just going to let Dennis very quickly finish his remarks.
Diminish the debate. Yeah,
Ben,
sure,
Ben,
Darren,
don't
I was talking
interrupt all the
garbage.
time. Please, Ben. Look, you won Brexit 6 years ago. Stop refighting 2016. So
And
did
stop trying to
Brendan.
diminish the importance of Brexit. Stop trying to paint
Ben, I'm going to let Dennis very quickly
Dennis.
finish what he was going to say.
You lost Brexit. You lost the vote.
Ben,
You should back off and let us Brexiteers get on with it.
Don't talk over people. I can talk over you longer than you can talk over than me. I'm much younger than you. I'm more experienced. Now, we saw yesterday Andrea Jenkins giving the Brexit side to the British people. I suggest you calmly talk to all the candidates and explain to them exactly what you want happening. More break with Europe, surrender to the DUP, abolish a Good Friday, by all means. Let's see how it works in the election.
Dennis, I want to pull you up on something that you said there.
Dennis.
Ben, before I bring you in, Dennis, I just want to touch on something that you said, because you actually said, look, I'm in France and we're talking about European defence and how we actually need to really work together collaboratively and respectfully on defence of the realm. I couldn't agree with you more. But Dennis, you're in France, right? France has hardly been standing as robustly, has it, against the Russians, like Boris Johnson has done and post-Brexit Britain has done?
Well, France has sent a quarter of its highest, most advanced technology, the Caesar howitzers, which are the best Russian killers around. We've sent very good handheld anti-tank missiles, and I accept that fully. Every country is sending what it can in coordination with NATO, principally led by America. We were talking about sending tanks, and the Americans phoned up and said, no, that's a silly idea. So quickly we dropped it. So the French certainly have taken in far more Ukrainian refugees than Priti Patel has. She's been, I'm sorry, very, very mean and unpleasant. So every European country is there with other people from the Baltic states. Everybody is pulling together this slightly silly claim that Boris Johnson, whose Tory party took big donations from Russian oligarchs, created Londongrad, was the biggest friend Putin had in Europe, suddenly discovered the virtues of being hostile to Putin. I welcome his conversion to my point of view. I didn't change my mind on Putin for 10 years.
Yeah, Dennis, we've given you a good old go there, so I'm going to bring in an absolutely seething Ben Habib. And Ben, I just want to put that to you there. Basically, in a nutshell, what Dennis is saying is that, you're a bit like Japanese fighters that got lost in a forest and didn't know that World War II was over.
Well, I completely take exception to the parallel with the Russian Revolution. Brexit is a democratically exercised will of the British people. And people like Dennis have caused more problem for the country than anyone could imagine, given their steadfast refusal to accept the democratic will of the British people. But moving rapidly on, you know, defence of Europe has got absolutely nothing to do with the European Union. It is absolutely to do with NATO, where actually the United Kingdom has been a leading light and a member ever since its creation. And France, by the way, whatever howitzers they've been sending to Russia, Macron's been busy shuttling backwards and forwards, and through his diplomacy, giving legitimacy to Putin. You know, there are two dimensions to fighting this battle. There's one actually on the ground, and then there's the diplomatic battle. And I'm afraid Macron is absolutely diminished France's standing internationally by the way he's sidled up to Putin. And I'm not a fan of Boris Johnson, but Boris Johnson has done a fantastic job on the international stage for the United Kingdom, which we wouldn't be able to do if we were in the EU, because we would be compromised by Germany's massive conflict of interest, because they depend very largely on Russian oil and gas for their economy. No, I'm afraid Brexit Britain, to the extent that we've got it, and we haven't quite got it. Brexit Britain is proving to be a much better place to be than as a member of the European Union.
Well, indeed, Ben Habib, but I want to bring in Brendan Chilton there, who's been sitting very patiently waiting for the two of you to go on at each other. But Brendan, what do you think about the French response? Are you in Ben Habib's camp or Dennis McShane's camp, who I imagine is enjoying a nice, refreshing glass of rosé, Provence rosé, is it, Dennis? Well, we'll ask him that in a minute.
I wish.
Well, I wish I was enjoying a nice glass of Provence rosé as well, actually. It's lovely weather where I am. I lean slightly more towards Ben's position on this. I think some of our European neighbours' response to the position in Russia and the Ukraine at the moment could have been a lot stronger. But I would just like, if I can, to jump back on the question of the Japanese soldiers still fighting the last war. I by no means wish to resurrect the debates around Brexit, but there are still two very important points that are not yet resolved. There is huge difficulties with businesses that are trading between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. I'm not seeking to reopen the debate, but that's got to be resolved. The second issue is authorities in Kent, where I live, it took on a load of new staff to do the checks at the borders of things coming in from the EU to Great Britain, and the government have continued to kick those future arrangements down the road. So when I said we need to revisit Brexit, those are the two specific things that business need the government to get on with. But the second will of the people is that we're out. We just need a government to tidy those two things up.
Right, so we haven't got very long left, but I want to ask each of you in turn, and it will be in turn, men, best behaviour. I want to know, would a Remainer be credible as Prime Minister? Because, Dennis, I'm assuming your argument is that we need to just move on.
Well, I don't think a Remainer will be elected to lead the Conservative Party. I mean, the last vague possible one was Ben Wallace. He quite sensibly is holding his fire. He knows the next election there isn't going to be a majority for the Conservatives. It's going to be pretty chaotic over the next few years. He's waiting then to pick up the Tory party. Keir Starmer said unequivocally, I've written it, we're not having a second referendum. We're not rejoining. The only debate is, are we with our generals and admirals and our business people, especially in Northern Ireland, who want a good relationship with the rest of Europe, or do we have to keep insulting them and patronising them? As if I may say so, this nonsense about Macron and Russia has proved in our debate tonight. And as Boris Johnson continually insulting Macron, every other European leader, as a result, they don't really want to talk to us. When we behave like Andrea Jenkins and give them the famous finger, well, that doesn't make for good relations.
Ben Habib, then, is a Remainer a credible alternative as Prime Minister, and are we being a little bit too robust in hanging up on President Macron? We haven't got long, so I'm going to ask you to be quick, Ben.
Well, if as a Remainer you're defining everyone who voted Remain, I don't think that's right. I think there are some Remainers who've seen the light. Dennis isn't amongst them. But absolutely, as far as Macron is concerned, he is the one who should be in the crosshairs of judgment, not our Prime Minister. Our Prime Minister, if he's guilty of anything, is referring to Macron repeatedly as his friend and partner. It's Macron who takes a belligerent attitude to our fishing vessels. It's Macron who beats the drum against the United Kingdom when he wanted to get re-elected. It's Macron who impounds our ships. It's Macron who's floating those illegal immigrants across the North Sea in breach of his international and bilateral relationship and agreements with the United Kingdom. Macron is a pain for the United Kingdom. In fact, he shouldn't be an elected politician at all.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there. Brendan, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. We are going to have to leave it there. But Brendan, I'm sure Dennis McShane will get you a glass of Provence Rosé back from the south of France. That was the co-founder of the independent network, British network, Brendan Chilton, former Minister for Europe, Dennis McShane, and the former Brexit Party MEP, Ben Habib. Now, folks, thank you very much for watching. We're going to come back straight after whatever's coming next. I have no idea if it's the weather. It's SAT results. We're discussing SAT results. And actually the fact that many kids are failing in our schools. Why is that? You'll find out after the weather.
Looking ahead at this evening's weather, and the UK is looking warm and dry with plenty of sunny spells for the vast majority. Let's take a look at the details. Plenty of blue skies this evening across southwest England. Winds will be coming in from the north, but will be light. Warm for all with temperatures around 22 degrees Celsius. Southeast England and the London area will be dry and sunny this evening with generally light winds. Temperatures will be around 25 degrees Celsius. Sunshine continuing across the whole of Wales through this evening with light northerly winds, feeling very warm with temperatures of 22 to 25 degrees Celsius. The Midlands will continue to enjoy blue skies and lots of sunshine. Winds will be light and it'll be warm for the time of day with temperatures still above 20 degrees Celsius. There is little chance of a little cloud across parts of northeast England, though there will be plenty of warm sunshine too. Temperatures ranging from 16 at the coast to 20 Celsius inland. Northern Scotland will remain cloudy this evening with some patchy light rain moving eastwards. Further south, it will be dry with plenty of sunshine, temperatures still around 18 degrees Celsius. Northern Ireland remains dry this evening with variable amounts of cloud. There'll be plenty of sunny spells though, with temperatures around 17 to 20 degrees Celsius. Winds staying light for all. Staying warm and dry tonight for many with clear skies. Patchy rain still possible for the far north of Scotland. That's how the weather is shaping up over tonight.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So Howie in for Real Britain, Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Welcome back to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. I want to talk to you about new figures from the Department of Education. These figures show that 4 in 10 children are below the set targets for reading, writing and maths when they're finishing primary school. That's fallen far short of recently departed Education Secretary Nadhim Zahawi's 90% target. Only 59% of kids met the required competency score, a drop of 10% from the pre-pandemic years. So what's going on in education and why are kids lagging behind when it comes to learning the basics? Joining me to discuss the report is education consultant Barry Smith. Barry, why do you believe that we've seen such a dramatic fall in kids' attainment here? Because it breaks my heart.
Right, well, they were away from school for 6 months, weren't they, over this period of the pandemic period? So the government reaction to that, they had, I think, a 4-month period away, then we came back, we had another 2-month period away. Yes, we tried to do stuff with online learning. Online learning wasn't very successful for older kids, let alone younger kids in primary schools. The average school day is only probably about 5 hours actual contact time having lessons. Schools have lots of holidays. Kids are out of school and at home. Schools are closed about 6 months of the year. So if parents aren't closing those gaps when kids are off, if parents aren't working with kids and reading with them, helping with their maths and so on, then yeah, when they haven't had that access to direct teaching, they're going to fall back. It's pretty common sense, really.
Yeah, but Barry, do you agree with me that actually there's far too much of a shrug of the shoulders, and basically parents these days seem to want schools to do everything from take kids to the opticians to teach them to read and write? It used to be a lot more hands-on. Do you think actually parents have stepped back from educating
there are an awful lot of issues there, aren't there? I mean, if there's a call from the media to do something about some societal issue, the government has to be seen to act, and they'll often go, right, we'll give more responsibility to schools. We'll expand the curriculum. We'll get teachers to teach more and more and more. Well, something's got to give, and MPs aren't going to turn around and say, tell you what, parents, you need to step up and you need to do more. That's not an election winner, and well, as we all know, clearly, MPs will do what they need to do to save their own jobs.
Well, indeed. So then my final question to you then, what do you actually, do you blame lay the blame rather squarely on the door of the lockdown? And actually, do you think there was a dereliction of duty where we closed off the entire country to protect those primarily aged over 80 who were most at risk from COVID, and we've said to hell with it, with the futures of a generation of kids?
I mean, with the first lockdown, nobody really knew what was going on. Everybody was panicked. Then we came back. That was a good 4-month stint. Then there was that further lockdown, wasn't there, around the Omicron and all the rest of it. So, yeah, kids suffered. Of course they suffered. Initially, but look, let's make comparisons with countries like Sweden, where they didn't close down at all, or states like Florida, where they kept their schools open. Yeah, if you're not having that input one-on-one, not one-on-one, but a classroom, direct input with your teacher, it's going to suffer. Knowing that is pretty obvious. Parents could have stepped up, but then parents have full-time jobs very often, and there's 2 of them working. So, and remember, if you look at stats, There's something like 24% of 4-year-olds have their own tablet. They're on the internet. 10-year-olds, about 50% of 10-year-olds have their own mobile phone.
Yeah.
So there's a hell of a lot of time spent outside of school with kids accessing social media and so on. They're not reading. They're not doing additional maths.
Well, indeed. And Barry, we're going to have to leave it there. But I tell you what breaks my heart is the fact that kids haven't been able to see smiles and mouth movements. So they're struggling to actually function as far as speech is concerned as well. And that, it beggars belief. It really, really does. But that was the education consultant, Barry Smith there. With me now, still in my studio, is Maya Tusi. Maya, this, to me, right, it goes back to that fundamental question of where you were at on lockdown. You know where I was at on lockdown, which was highly sceptical about the efficacy of lockdowns and actually the proportionality of lockdowns. And we're seeing now that we have ruined, potentially, the future of an entire generation.
Absolutely. As you and Barry were discussing the effects, the negative impacts of those sort of those days. Not only that, the problem is that politicians do short-termism and specifically ignore certain groups, mainly because they either don't vote or they try to give them some sort of generic policy. So, for example, they do education policies and they keep changing them every couple of years, which is not really good for education, to get the middle-class parents to vote for them. But in reality, who are the people who are the most damaged long-term? Not even your GCSE or A-level students, the early days education. Those kids who were 5, 6, 7, they are even more harmed than even GCSE A-levels, even me, even you, even our grandparents who were lonely and a lot of people who were sick. These kids, they still have their future, and their future is completely ruined. And they don't have to just live with that. They also have to live with the fact that every 10 minutes, the governments, successive governments and going forward are going to keep changing education policies.
Yeah, I mean, it does. It breaks my... And I'm not saying that as hyperbole either. It really does break my heart that we've done this to children, right? Yeah. We're supposed to be there to protect children.
There was the outrage at the time.
Exactly. Where was the outrage? Yep. You're exactly right, Maya. But going back to that conversation that we had earlier about getting Brexit done and the fact it's not done, do you actually think Boris Johnson's legacy will be as someone who delivered Brexit? Or would you argue with Ben Habib, the former Brexit Party MEP, that actually Brexit isn't anywhere near done?
To be fair, it really depends on if the way things go, which should go, that Brexit will remain Brexit. We're not going to rejoin the EU. And the next Tory leader and the next government essentially make things better and make the right amendments, or just keep the same stuff and just somehow distract the public. Then by that point, within the next decade, people will look back and say, actually, yeah, Boris did deliver Brexit, because they will forget about the details if they're fixed. If we obviously rejoin the EU, then the whole thing is completely different. Then there's a new fight to actually...
God forbid, Maya Tusi. God forbid. God forbid. But that was the political commentator Maya Tusi there, who will be with me throughout the show. But, folks, we're going to come back and discuss the PM's true statesmanship over the war in Ukraine and how he's given more succour and support than any other world leader. But now it's time for a check on the news headlines with Alice Porter.
It's just gone 3:30. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. The Defence Secretary, who was tipped as a front-runner in the Conservative Party leadership contest, has ruled himself out of the race. Posting on Twitter, Ben Wallace said it wasn't an easy choice, but his focus is his current job and keeping the country safe. Those who have entered the contest include former Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch, who says she supports lower taxes, as well as Rishi Sunak. Meanwhile, Education Minister Andrea Jenkins has admitted she should have shown more composure after she made a rude gesture outside Downing Street. She was seen raising her middle finger to what she described as a baying mob. She says she has reached the end of her tether, adding she's only human. Ukrainian soldiers have started a new training programme in the UK to help them win the war against Russia. British troops will train up to 10,000 Ukrainians at sites across the country. It's being run by the Ministry of Defence, which says it will give volunteer recruits the necessary skills to fight on the front line. Sri Lanka's Prime Minister says he's willing to resign to make way for an all-party government following demonstrations across the country. Thousands of protesters have stormed the president's official residence in the latest escalation of political unrest. Police fired water cannon and tear gas at demonstrators who are demanding a regime change. At least 2 people have been gored during Pamplona's bull run, the first time since the event started on Wednesday. Thousands of people turn out every year to watch the spectacle, which features 8 runs that last between 3 and 5 minutes each. 4 others were taken to hospital with concussions and injuries after falling. TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Darren will be back in a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Liar, charlatan, clown, buffoon. No, that's not me insulting you, my lovely viewers. They're just some of the words that have been used to describe Boris Johnson, primarily by the mainstream media, both before and since his resignation. However, in his most recent piece for The Telegraph, my next guest has used a word to describe Boris that none of us are using. Statesman. According to Con Coughlin, Boris Johnson's response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine actually saved Kyiv at the start of the invasion and has far outshone the responses of other Western leaders like that clown Macron. So joining me now is Con Coughlin, the defence editor and chief foreign affairs columnist at The Telegraph, to explain and elaborate on his comments. Con, thank you very much for your company. Now, just briefly, we've heard the news today that the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, won't be running for Prime Minister. Were you disappointed at that?
Well, actually, I think it's good for the country that we've got some kind of continuity. Ben Wallace has had a very good war, so to speak, during the Ukraine crisis, not least because he's followed Boris Johnson's lead. And as I said in my Telegraph column last week, Boris Johnson, whatever faults he might have on the domestic agenda, has shown true statesmanship when it comes to Ukraine. And against a very weak field of other Western leaders, you know, Joe Biden, who can't tell the difference between Sweden and Switzerland, etc., he has shown a much needed sense of clarity of purpose in supporting the Ukrainians and making sure they've got the equipment they need. As your report just said, we are now training up to 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers on Salisbury Plain to make sure that Russia does not win this war. This is the kind of leadership we need. And I think with Ben Wallace still at the Ministry of Defence, and hopefully he will stay there, whoever replaces Mr. Johnson, at least there will be some continuity on the Ukraine issue.
Yes, because Con, I don't know if you agree with me, but it strikes me, at least, that as far as Brexit's concerned, Boris Johnson must be seen exclusively through the lens of Brexit. So all of the well-to-do liberals in the media sneer and give the side eye to Boris Johnson no matter what he does, even though, Con, his response to Ukraine has been much more robust than supposedly liberal safe havens like Germany and France.
Well, one of the reasons I supported Brexit is I thought the European Union was a liability when it came to defence issues, and particularly to Britain's national interest. I mean, I've covered wars for the last 30-odd years, and at every juncture, the EU, whether it's in Bosnia, whether it's in the Middle East, has been found wanting. And of course, in terms of Ukraine, it's not the EU response that has been noted, it's the NATO response that's been noted. And of course, within NATO, Britain is by far the most important European partner. And at a time when we have a very weak American president, Boris Johnson has actually showed tremendous courage and leadership. So it's NATO, not the European Union, that counts. And all those Remainers who still think that the European Union is going to save us in some strange way should think again, because our collective security is invested in NATO, and Brussels, when it comes to security, is a liability.
Yeah, we're just seeing on screen, Con, just for my radio viewers, some artwork created in support of the Prime Minister during his stance from the Ukrainian people. Quite moving, stirring stuff, actually. He's been painted here as a knight in shining armour with the Union Jack on his breast there. I mean, how much do you think the Ukrainian people will notice the departure of Boris Johnson?
Well, I hope they don't, but that really depends on who replaces him. And, you know, I think when you start, I think we need to look at the candidates, not just from the perspective of the domestic agenda, but the international agenda. So Rishi Sunak is against increasing the defence budget. Liz Truss has made some very unfortunate comments about the Ukraine conflict, saying that, you know, we need to fight until the whole of Crimea is liberated. And when you sort of dig down into the people vying to replace Mr. Johnson as leader, I don't think any of them have a very credible record when it comes to defence and national security. So you know, I hope that, you know, with people like Ben Wallace still at the MOD, assuming he retains that portfolio under the next Prime Minister, that there will be some continuity, because Britain has done itself a great deal of good on the international stage on the Ukraine issue. It has shown moral courage, which is in short supply. And when you look at the increasing threat posed by the autocracies, the Russias, the Irans, the Chinas, then you need this kind of leadership if we are going to protect our way of life and the whole concept of Western democratic government.
Well, I must say, Con, I think you're doing a better job than anyone has done on the programme today in making a case for Boris Johnson. And actually, a lot of my viewers are completely of the view that we have made an absolutely horrific mistake. Or not we have made the mistake, but the Conservative Parliamentary Party has made an absolutely horrific mistake. Do you think from a NATO perspective, if we do end up, of course, as you said there, Rishi Sunak is not in favour of spending more money on defence, and actually he's more hawkish on the deficit and things like that. Do you think those sort of, basically Vladimir Putin is bad Vlad going to be rubbing his hands with glee?
Well, I think Vladimir Putin and all the other cronies around him in the Kremlin will be delighted to see the back of Boris Johnson, because he's the one person who stood up to them. I mean, I wouldn't say that Boris has a completely unblemished record when it comes to the Russians. For my liking, there's been far too much Russian money sloshing around London. And despite all the pledges after the Salisbury attacks in 2018, successive Conservative governments have not done enough to confront the way the Russians have infiltrated British society. So there's a lot more work to be done there. But I think in terms of NATO, I mean, Boris Johnson has set a very high bar. And I think, as I said, when the Conservative Party comes to judge who should replace him, these are very serious issues. And you cannot ignore them. And if post-Brexit, and if we talk about global Britain, well, what we've done with Ukraine is started to reassert Britain's identity as a separate world power that stands for something. And I think any future prime minister who undermines that status does so at their peril.
Indeed, Con, I couldn't have put it better myself, but of course I would expect no less from the defence editor and chief foreign affairs columnist at The Telegraph.
You're very kind.
Now, folks, I'm going to come to Maya Tusi, who is with me live in the studio, political commentator and famous YouTuber. Now, Maya, the whole premise there of Boris Johnson being seen as a statesman from the likes of Ukraine saying, oh, my word, what have the Conservative Parliamentary Party done? Do you think, are there going to be voices that start to say that over the months and years?
There will be voices, but they're slightly wrong because those who want Ukraine to be supported or those in Ukraine, like Zelensky, that want to be supported, that narrative, that's not going to change because the overall foreign policy in this country is still controlled by the FCO, the Foreign Office, and the establishment. Generally speaking, if this was a race or an option between Jeremy Corbyn and Tony Blair, then yes. If the direction is going to change that much, then you should worry if you're Zelensky. But generally speaking, really doesn't matter what Liz Truss has said once or Rishi Sunak had in a debate about the budget in terms of increasing it or cutting it. Generally speaking, every single candidate on that list is going to be going with the same narrative anyway. So, I mean, if Zelensky is sitting there in his office panicking that, oh, my bestie is going, he shouldn't really worry because the whole thing's going to continue anyway.
In the final, and just briefly, Maya, if you would, but in the final months of his premiership, Boris Johnson cancelled his appearance at a Levelling Up conference in, I believe it was Doncaster, off the top of my head. And actually, a lot of Red Wall MPs were saying, well, hang on a minute, you're the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, not Ukraine. Do you think actually there was a bit too much emphasis on Ukraine and not enough of a focus on domestic affairs here in Blighty?
He took a bit of a gamble and he kind of overplayed his hand. The first couple of times, being in Ukraine, that kind of played well. Like, you're statesman, you're from foreign affairs, good. But towards the end, that move, for example, those sort of moves, like if we're getting to go to your kind of actual domestic events, was clearly the wrong decision. And that was the beginning of the end, probably in his brain. I think he thought, yeah, that was wrong. This is basically, it's too late now to use Levelling Up as I'm Boris Johnson, keep me. No one's going to care anymore. So, and the Ukraine thing, overplayed already. So that's the problem.
And we mentioned the Macron question. What do you make of that? The idea that Macron has been robust on Ukraine, right?
Well, Macron was the first leader that went to see Putin when the war started. I mean, he's got no leg to stand on, that guy.
Exactly.
His country is still addicted to Putin's gas and oil, so, it can't really talk about integrity. So.
Indeed, I tell you what, you get more from a Macron in Marks and Spencer, never mind Macron, President of France, but there we are, folks. Now, I'm going to go to Mark White, our foreign affairs, home affairs even. I'm still on foreign affairs in my head. Our home and security editor, Mark White, has this report for you all.
They are the familiar sounds of battle, but these Ukrainian troops are thousands of miles from the dangers of the front line. They are the first of at least 10,000 new recruits to the Ukrainian armed forces who are being trained here in the UK by the British military.
We're working on getting you some Ukrainian uniform rather than using the British one.
Checking on their progress, the UK Defence Secretary. He knows these Ukrainian troops and their countrymen and women back home are extremely grateful for the support and leadership Boris Johnson's government has provided. That level of commitment will remain, he says, whoever becomes the new British Prime Minister.
Britain is full square behind them. And, the assistance to Ukraine we give is not just one person. We're not me, not the Prime Minister. It's the whole effort. We've got the British Army up here today, up in the north of England, training Ukrainians on what it needs to do. It's got people in Poland and in Estonia standing by our NATO colleagues. That's the reality, is that, actions matter in all of this. And, while the Prime Minister will be incredibly sad to leave this post, he has led from the front on Ukraine, but the whole of the political system is supportive of what we're doing in Ukraine. I don't expect that to finish at all.
Once the fresh mag's on, you're going to cop the weapon system again.
The UK has already provided £1.3 billion in support for Ukraine and supplied thousands of anti-tank missiles, artillery and other equipment. For the Ukrainian recruits here, even just a few weeks' training with the British Army is highly valuable.
I believe we're here to share the experience and receive British experience from the soldiers, to receive proper trainings from our trainers, and just combine that and receive the best and most valuable skills.
It's very important to combine our military experience with your standards, UK Army, and compare and make our soldier better.
Most of these recruits left ordinary jobs in Ukraine to defend their country. Many had never handled weapons before the conflict, but their British training officers say they can't fault their motivation and commitment.
They're very, very motivated. It's really impressive to see. So with quite high ambitions in terms of the training, expecting to have to scale back, but the level that they're at is incredible. They've met the expectations, if not more.
The battle for number 10 has barely even begun. But in the weeks ahead, all of the candidates will be keen to reassure the government in Kyiv that Britain's support in their fight against Russian aggression is unwavering, whoever gets the top job. Mark White, GB News.
That was our Home and Security Editor Mark White with a report from Ukraine stressing the fact that the United Kingdom, even without Boris Johnson, will be resolutely behind the Ukrainian people. But now, folks, following the PM's resignation, another issue that's been called into question is around the future of Brexit. Will Remainers attempt to overturn the result now that the Brexit Prime Minister, a titan of Brexit, has been pushed out of office? Or is this the opportunity for Brexit to be done right, in some opinion, in some people's views, with the protocol issue, of course, being the most famous, the issue around Northern Ireland, exports to and from, being addressed, and those are the teething issues. Well, with me now is a man who knows a thing or two about Brexit. He was head of ground campaigns at the Win and Vote Leave campaign during the UK's referendum on EU membership, Nick Varley. Nick, thank you very much for your company. Do you agree with my viewers who have been writing in saying, look, I agree with Boris on Brexit, but I reckon it hasn't been delivered in full yet?
Thank you for having me, Darren. So I think that Boris leaving obviously presents a pretty big challenge in the context of, OK, so what happens next on Brexit? I think my view was always that Brexit was not a single moment. Of course, the referendum, the vote itself, was a single moment that happened on a single day. But the reality is that the United Kingdom leaving the European Union was never going to be done and dusted in a week, a month, or indeed even 6 years. I think it's a bigger challenge than that is not just an administrative one, but then also subsequently a policy decision-making issue. The Northern Ireland Protocol obviously remains essentially unresolved. There's many people in the unionist community in Northern Ireland who don't want to see the protocol continue as it is. I think that the UK government needs to hold its ground, that change is required on the protocol. But I also think that Boris's departure as Prime Minister gives a new incoming Prime Minister a bit of space to reset the relationship with the EU. Now, to be clear, when I think sometimes you hear politicians from European Union member states, or indeed from the Commission, say, we need a reset with the UK, what they mean is they need, the UK needs a Prime Minister that's more compliant with what we ask or tell them to do. That's obviously not where I'm coming from with this, but I think that a change in the relationship, a reset, a more constructive relationship from both sides, will give us the chance to potentially settle the protocol issue. But then in reality, and that's what I'm looking at when I think about the leadership contest that's underway, is it's not just about solving the protocol issue. That will be resolved one way or another relatively soon in the scheme of things. It's about who does what next. Okay, so we fix it, and then what do we do? How do we capture and seize the benefits of being a sovereign independent country?
So then whose approach do you think, Nick, is the best one? Because if you consider Tom Tugendhat saying, actually, you know, we're going to get Brexit right and make it work, and then you've got someone like Liz Truss, who is a bit considered to be a bit more hardline, although I must say she hasn't actually announced that she's standing for the leadership of the Conservative Party. But who do you think has the best common sense approach here?
Well, I think that who will best deliver Brexit is in a way, forgive me, Darren, but it's the wrong question, in that sort of delivering Brexit to me means who is going to sort out the kerfuffle over the protocol, right? Who's going to sort that out? But that's kind of to miss the point. I think that's to think in too short term of a way. The question is who is best placed to lead the United Kingdom into the next, for the rest of this decade and into the next, as a Conservative Prime Minister, and who will most seize the benefits of Brexit. So who is going to use the benefits of divergence to create an enterprising environment for business?
We're going to have to leave it there, Nick, but I think going into the next decade, that's an optimistic shout for the Conservative Party. But there we are, former head of the Ground campaign for Vote Leave, Nick Varley there. Now, folks, you've been watching Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. I thank you very much for your company. This show is on every Saturday and Sunday at 2 o'clock, but for now, I'll leave you with the weather.
Looking ahead at this evening's weather, and the UK is looking warm and dry with plenty of sunny spells for the vast majority. Let's take a look at the details. Plenty of blue skies this evening across southwest England. Winds will be coming in from the north, but will be light. Warm for all, with temperatures around 22 degrees Celsius. Southeast England and the London area will be dry and sunny this evening with generally light winds. Temperatures will be around 25 degrees Celsius. Sunshine continuing across the whole of Wales through this evening with light northerly winds, feeling very warm with temperatures of 22 to 25 degrees Celsius. The Midlands will continue to enjoy blue skies and lots of sunshine. Winds will be light and it'll be warm for the time of day, with temperatures still above 20 degrees Celsius. There is little chance of a little cloud across parts of northeast England, though there will be plenty of warm sunshine too. Temperatures ranging from 16 at the coast to 20 Celsius inland. Northern Scotland will remain cloudy this evening, with some patchy light rain moving eastwards. Further south, it will be dry with plenty of sunshine, temperatures still around 18 degrees Celsius. Northern Ireland remains dry this evening with variable amounts of cloud. There'll be plenty of sunny spells though, with temperatures around 17 to 20 degrees Celsius. Winds staying light for all. Staying warm and dry tonight for many with clear skies. Patchy rain still possible for the far north of Scotland. That's how the weather is shaping up over tonight.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.